The Odyssey, Part 3, Book 17, The Beggar and the Faithful Dog. Telemachus returns to the family compound and is greeted tearfully by his mother and his nurse Euryclea. A soothsayer tells Penelope that Odysseus is alive and is already in Ithaca. The suspense builds as Odysseus, once again disguised as a beggar, finally returns to his home, accompanied only by the swineherd. He has been away for 20 years. Only one creature recognizes him. An old hound lying near pricked up his ears and lifted up his muzzle. This was Argos, trained as a puppy by Odysseus, but never taken on a hunt before his master sailed for Troy. The young men afterward hunted wild goats with him and hare and deer, but he had grown old in his master's absence. Treated as rubbish now, he lay at last upon a mass of dung before the gates. Manure of mules and cows piled there until field hands could spread it on the king's estate. Abandoned there and half destroyed with flies, old Argos lay. But when he knew he heard Odysseus's voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. And the man looked away, wiping a salt tear from his cheek, but he hid this from Eumaeus. Then he said, I marvel that they leave this hound to lie here on the dung pile. He would have been a fine dog, from the look of him, though I can't say as to his power and speed when he was young. You find the same good build in house dogs. Table dogs landowners keep all for style. And you replied, Eumaeus, a hunter owned him, but the man is dead in some far place. If this old hound could show the form he had when Lord Odysseus left him, going to Troy, you'd see him soft and swift and strong. He never shrank from any savage thing he'd brought to bay in the deep woods. On the scent, no other dog kept up with him. Now misery has him in leash. His owner died abroad, and here the women slaves will take no care of him. You know how servants are. Without a master, they have no will to labor or excel. For Zeus, who views the wide world, takes away half the manhood of a man. That day he goes into captivity and slavery. Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight forward into the Megaron among the suitors. But death and darkness in that instant closed the eyes of Argos, who had seen his master Odysseus after 20 years. In the hall, the beggar is taunted by the suitors, but Penelope supports him. She has heard that the ragged stranger claims to have news of her husband. Unaware of who this beggar is, she invites him to visit her later in the night to talk about Odysseus. In Book 18, Penelope appears among the suitors and chastises Telemachus for allowing the stranger to be abused. She certainly must have warmed her husband's heart by doing this and by further singing the praises of her lost Odysseus. Book 19, Penelope, the Beggar, and the Nurse. After the suitors depart for the night, and after Odysseus and Telemachus discuss their strategy, the wily hero goes as appointed to Penelope with the idea of testing her and her maids. Remember that some of the maids have not been loyal to the household and have worked with the suitors against them. The faithful wife receives her disguised husband. We can imagine the tension Homer's audience must have felt. Would Odysseus be recognized? Willing hands brought a smooth bench and dropped a fleece upon it. Here the adventurer and king sat down, then carefully Penelope began. Friend, let me ask you first of all, who are you? Where do you come from? Of what nation and parents were you born? And he replied, My lady, never a man in the wide world should have a fault to find with you. Your name has gone out under heaven like the sweet honor of some God-fearing king who rules in equity over the strong. His black lands bear both wheat and barley, fruit trees laden bright, new lambs at lambing time, and the deep sea gives great hauls of fish by his good strategy, so that his folk fare well. Oh, my dear lady, this being so, let it suffice to ask me of other matters, not my blood, my homeland. Do not enforce me to recall my pain. My heart is sore, but I must not be found sitting in tears here in another's house. It is not well forever to be grieving. One of the maids might say, or you might think, I had got maudlin over cups of wine. Penelope replied, Stranger, my looks, my face, my carriage were soon lost or faded when the Achaeans crossed the sea to Troy, Odysseus my lord among the rest. If he returned, if he were here to care for me, I might be happily renowned. But grief instead heaven sent me, years of pain. Sons of the noblest families on the island, Dulichian, Same, wooden Zakynthos, with native Ithacans are here to court me, against my wish, and they consume this house. Can I give proper heed to guest or suppliant, or herald on the realm's affairs? How could I? Wasted with longing for Odysseus, while here they press for marriage. And now, as matters stand at last, I have no strength left to evade a marriage, cannot find any further way. My parents urge it upon me, and my son will not stand by while they eat up his property. He comprehends it, being a man full grown, able to oversee the kind of house Zeus would endow with honor. But you too confide in me. Tell me your ancestry. You are not born of mythic oak or stone. Here the beggar spins a yarn about his origins, pretending that he has met Odysseus on his travels. He cannot resist praising the lost hero, and he does so successfully enough to bring tears to Penelope's eyes. We can be sure that this does not displease the beggar. Now all these lies he made appear so truthful, she wept as she sat listening. The skin of her pale face grew moist, the way pure snow softens and glistens on the mountains, thawed by south wind after powdering from the west. And as the snow melts, mountain streams run full. So her white cheeks were wetted by these tears shed for her lord, and he close by her side. Imagine how his heart ached for his lady, his wife in tears, and yet he never blinked. His eyes might have been made of horn or iron, for all that she could see. He had this trick, wept if he willed to inwardly. Well, then, as soon as her relieving tears were shed, she spoke once more. I think that I shall say, friend, give me some proof. If it is really true that you were host in that place to my husband, with brave men, as you declare, come, tell me the quality of his clothing, how he looked, and some particular of his company. Odysseus answered, and his mind ranged far. Lady, so long a time now lies between, it is hard to speak of it. Here is the 20th year since that man left the island of my father. But I shall tell what memory calls to mind. A purple cloak and fleecy he had on, a double thick one. Then he wore a brooch made of pure gold with twin tubes for the prongs, and on the face a work of art, a hunting dog pining a spotted fawn in agony between his forepaws. Wonderful to see how, being gold and nothing more, he bit the golden deer convulsed, with wild hooves flying. Odysseus' shirt I noticed too, a fine, close-fitting tunic like dried onion skin, so soft it was and shiny. Now, hearing these details, minutely true, she felt more strangely moved, and tears flowed until she tasted her salt grief again. The storytelling beggar reveals that he has heard Odysseus is alive and is even now sailing for home. Penelope calls for the old nurse and asks her to wash the guest's feet, a sign of respect and honor. What follows is a scene of great emotional suspense. Eurycleia speaks to the supposed beggar. My heart within me stirs, mindful of something. Listen to what I say. Strangers have come here, many through the years, but no one ever came, I swear, who seemed so like Odysseus, body, voice, and limbs, as you do. Ready for this, Odysseus answered. Old woman, that is what they say. All who have seen the two of us remark how like we are, as you yourself have said, and rightly too. Then he kept still while the old nurse filled up her basin, glittering in firelight. She poured cold water in, then hot. But Lord Odysseus whirled suddenly from the fire to face the dark. The scar! He had forgotten that. She must not handle his scarred thigh, or the game was up. But when she bared her lord's leg, bending near, she knew the groove at once. An old wound, a boar's white tusk inflicted on Parnassus years ago. This was the scar the old nurse recognized. She traced it under her spread hands, then let go, and into the basin fell the lower leg, making the bronze clang, sloshing the water out. Then joy and anguish seized her heart. Her eyes filled up with tears, her throat closed, and she whispered, with hand held out to touch his chin, "Oh, yes, you are Odysseus. Ah, dear child, I could not see you until now, not till I knew my master's very body with my hands." Quickly, Odysseus swears Euryclea to secrecy. Meanwhile, Athena has cast a spell on Penelope so that she has taken no notice of this recognition scene. Penelope adds to the suspense by deciding on a test for the suitors the next day. Without realizing it, she has now given Odysseus a way to defeat the suitors.